right, everyone. Thanks for tuning into another episode of Pushing the Pylon. This is your host, Jim Tannhauser, and we have a fun week one of football to talk about. Incredible week. Better for some than others. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, looking at me over here, but we'll get into that later on. We have to talk about this exciting hell of a finish we had for Monday Night Football tonight. I'm recording a couple hours after the end of Monday Night Football, where we had the Baltimore Ravens and Las Vegas Raiders go into overtime. Dramatic finish. We'll touch base on that. We have to talk about my Jags report, which we'll be doing every episode. This one's not going to be so fun for me to talk about, but we're going to anyway. There's a lot of criticism, but there is some optimism in there, and we're going to talk about that. Hit or stand coming back for a third consecutive episode. This time, the 0-1 edition. We're going to talk about teams that were 0-1 to start the year, that their fan bases may already be panicking. We're going to talk about whether or not you should be panicking if you're a fan of one of those teams. And then we're going to wrap it up with a preview of Thursday Night Football. We have a New York Giants, Washington Redskins, Washington football team, excuse me. As soon as I started saying it, it left my mouth. It's still there. They have to name that team sooner than later, because I'm getting sick of calling them the football team. But anyway, NFC East matchup, we're getting that on Thursday, and we'll talk about that. But before any of that, we have to address my picks I made this week. I made picks on every game we had on last Thursday. The Dallas Cowboys did cover the spread that I picked them at. That was our first win of the year. And from there, we got pretty mediocre. If I counted this right, we have about a 500 record on Sunday. Thursday night's game brings us up. We had the Eagles plus 3.5. That was a blowout win. Steelers plus 6.5. They won anyway. The Vikings lost in overtime. We had them, unfortunately. The 49ers minus 9.5 did not cover. They did win the game, however. We had the Seahawks and Cardinals both winning, both covering. The Jaguars didn't cover like they were supposed to. We'll ignore that, though, obviously, until a little later. The Chargers were underdogs. They went to Washington and won, so we had that correct. The Panthers covered and won against the Jets. The Chiefs won, however, they did not cover the -5 that we picked them at, only winning by 4. That's a loss for us. Moving on, the Patriots couldn't win their game. That's a loss for us as well. We had the Saints underdogs, huge blowout win. Scratching my head as to why they were underdogs. What did we miss? Why did we think that Packers team was going to beat up on them? I don't know. We had that correct, however. Giants plus 3, that was an L for us as they lost. We had the Rams Sunday Night Football minus 8.5. They covered. They had a big win against the Chicago Bears. And tonight I had the Ravens winning by, I said by a touchdown or more. The spread was 3. Didn't matter. They lost straight up. That was a fun game. More so the fourth quarter and overtime, which it eventually led into. We had a big Lamar Jackson fumble when they were up 17-10 that turned the tide of that whole game. From that point on, if you were someone like me who had picked the Ravens -3, you're sitting there sweating, saying this is going to be a tie, probably best case scenario, especially as it was getting closer to overtime. When those type of games, you need a breakout touchdown, like, spoiler alert, you ended up having, but with the Raiders, you needed that for the Ravens to go over 3, and it wasn't likely to happen. It didn't happen. And the reason for that, I would say, is a resilient Raiders defense that bent a lot but didn't break to Lamar Jackson. I mean, you can only do so much with him. You're not going to completely contain that, especially on week 1 when you're learning about the Baltimore Ravens and what they worked on in the offseason. But all things considered, credit to the Raiders defense. They stuck out just long enough, got their offense back on the field, which, as some of my friends know, I'm a big Derek Carr critic. I have nothing to say about him tonight. He did a great job. He balled out at the end for sure, and he had every reason to flex a little bit, to show a little bit of that swagger he has hidden deep in there that he normally doesn't show. From Fresno State University, Swag University, apparently. Him and Paul George, the only two I can think of off the top of my head. But what about Brian Edwards, South Carolina University there, I believe. He's someone all offseason I've been hyping up for fantasy football purposes. My brother out there, his dynasty team, very weak at receiver. I said, hey, Brian Edwards out there on free agency. That's a guy you may want. I mean, he couldn't fit on my team. I'm receiver heavy. But that's a guy you go out and get, and it showed tonight. He caught a huge pass at the end of the game. All fourth quarter, he was kind of getting back in there where he wasn't getting the action early on. A lot of the Brian Edwards stands, as some people call him, like myself, we're wondering where he was, why he wasn't lighting up the stat sheet. He came through in the end along with Hunter Renfrow. So it's looking like that Raiders offense may not need a superstar receiver, and they can kind of work with what they have. I mean, Henry Ruggs, all due respect to him, probably not a number one receiver right now, this very second. He has to be for the Raiders, but he probably shouldn't be a number one receiver right now. That being said, he did what he had to do, got the Raiders the win. Lamar, though, second fumble in overtime, that really gives his critics some fuel to go after him, even though he's one of the best quarterback rushers we've ever seen, if not the best we've ever seen. In my opinion, he's better than Michael Vick on that rushing, aspect. I'm not going to say he's a quarterback overall just yet. It's too early for that, even though, Lamar's MVP may say put me in that debate anyway. Next week, we see the Ravens losing this huge crusher game to lose in overtime when you were winning by a touchdown to go into the fourth quarter. They have to host the Kansas City Chiefs next week, the Chiefs, they had a video game-like bounce back in the second half of their game on Sunday. They probably have their confidence through the ceiling. They don't feel like anyone can stop them. That could work in Baltimore's favor to catch them sleeping, but I don't think it's going to, and the Ravens really are going to have to dig deep to try to not go 0-2 to start the season, put themselves in that deep hole. And then they're going to be rooting for the Raiders next week. They're going to be traveling to Pittsburgh. The Steelers, huge moral victory, literal victory, but the moral victory of fighting against a very chippy Bills team, which many crowned already as an AFC likely champion, likely representative in the Super Bowl. And that took a big grinding halt that we'll see if the Bills bounce back from, and we'll talk about that a little later. And Hitter Stand, we're going to be talking about them as well. This is the segment I'm dreading talking about, the Jags Report. I try to give a Jags Report every podcast episode, good, bad, or indifferent. Because even though a lot of you, if any of you, care about the Jaguars out there, I know there's not many Jags fans out there at all that are watching this. But for the ones that are, this little report will let you get some insight from a fellow Jags fan. For those of you that don't follow the Jaguars, it's your chance to learn about them or your chance to rag on them like a lot of you took your liberty to in the past 48 hours. Before I keep going, small speed bump in the podcast. We have to charge this laptop. We don't want that dying mid-episode. Just pretend there was some please stand by music and audio there for a minute. We're good now, though. That Jaguars report, the Charger thing right there is very symbolic of it, because those Jaguars just were not charged up to come into the season. They looked rough. They looked like they were the worst team in the NFL projected coming into this game, not their opponent, which I think a lot of people crowned as the worst team in the league without Deshaun Watson, trying to rely on Tyrod Taylor. He did great. Nothing I can say bad about Tyrod Taylor after Sunday's performance. He balled out. He had a lot of aging players come back from the dead for him. Damn, Mike. And just absolutely proved clutch for him. You had Danny Amendola, which, where in the world has he been? I feel like I haven't said that name in at least 2-3 seasons. He scores a touchdown to Jaguars. You have Mark Ingram, who no one even considered to be good enough to be a viable back for the Texans. Everyone thought David Johnson, Phillip Lindsay were going to overshadow. Mark Ingram stepped in and had a big day. Jaguars secondary, though, my goodness gracious, I may have wanted Bishop Sycamore out there for their defense because they may have had a better chance against professionals than the Jaguars looked like. It was bad. They really didn't give Trevor Lawrence a chance to ball out or a chance to get comfortable. He was kind of playing from behind the whole game, right from the drive that you had the Texans on the goal line. They tried a lateral pass that looked like a handoff, which was fumbled, recovered by the Jaguars, until you realized that it was a forward pass, which made it an incomplete pass anyway. From there, the Texans end up scoring, and then Trevor Lawrence has to play from behind, where he starts, playing like a rookie. I know a lot of people out there think number one pick, all the hype in the world, generational talent, can't make a mistake, but guess what? That's just unrealistic. He's going to make mistakes. He didn't make one mistake. He didn't make two mistakes. He made more like 3+ mistakes yesterday. The interceptions weren't good. It wasn't like a, Tom Brady on Thursday where it's off the hands of his running back into the hands of the defense. They were just pretty bad throws behind the receivers on a couple of them, and one interception. I believe the receiver just cut through the zone, and Trevor just underthrew it, put it right in the defender's hands. But hey, my gripe is certainly with not Trevor Lawrence, because for those 3 interceptions he still had a good game. Over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns to go with those 3 interceptions. He certainly wasn't the problem. I think that's fair to say. The drops were a big issue as well. You had receivers, you had running backs, you had James Robinson, who didn't get involved in the run game at all. They tried to get him involved in the pass game. He had a catch or two here and there, but I mean, the drops were just so noticeable. DJ Chark was guilty of 1 or 2. And that's just not good for a rookie. It's not good for anybody, but for a rookie who needs to build that confidence on the road against a divisional opponent on a team that's a lot, in the case of a lot of people in the league, the laughingstock of the league. I hate to say it, but with games like this where they just play under expectation, it's going to happen. That narrative's going to be brought up when you have James Robinson, the top 10 running back last year statistically, get 5 carries and he gets overshadowed by Carlos Hyde. What do you expect is going to happen? I mean, I'm not an NFL coach. I'm not an NFL executive, obviously, but I don't think it takes one to see that using your star back for 5 carries is no bueno. It's no bueno at all. And I don't care if Travis Etienne got hurt. You had plenty of time to change that game plan to kind of go back into 2020 season, maybe show shades of that run-heavy offense. And that's what gets Trevor comfortable, perhaps. But we didn't see it. And just like that, everyone in the AFC South lost besides the Houston Texans. Surprise, surprise, they're in first place after week 1. The other thing I just want to touch base on with Urban Meyer, his coaching debut, a lot of memes out there, I'll tell you. I couldn't go on Twitter yesterday without seeing the Urban Meyer memes. Most of them were from Jaguars fans and Jags Twitter, which I love and appreciate about our fan base, to be self-deprecating with their humor. But yeah, the whole notion of, that there's a report that came out, I believe it was on Sunday before football kickoff, or on Saturday, that there's a tension growing in the locker room with players because Urban Meyer is showing frustration. He's kind of angry, over aggressive. For one, I don't know if you know Urban Meyer. Nice to meet you if so, but this isn't anything new for Urban Meyer. He is not, I don't want to say he's not calm, cool, collected, but he's certainly not someone who doesn't speak out. He's certainly, going to be an outspoken coach. He's an outspoken icon. That's what makes him so great. So yeah, he's going to get pissed. He's going to get angry. He's going into a franchise who, besides 2017-18 season, for the past decade has been one of the worst teams in the league. So he has expectations coming in. I hope his expectations aren't to go win a Super Bowl in year one, because that's a tad unrealistic, to put it lightly. But I like that attitude personally as a fan. It's good to know that your coach is as mad as you are. Hopefully that's a healthy mad, that he can turn that into some improvement for his team and not just blind anger. Save that blind anger for the fans and Twitter. I'm fine though. I'm optimistic with Urban Meyer. I'm optimistic with Trevor Lawrence. I'm optimistic with the Jaguars. Again, I don't think they're going to go win a Super Bowl. Spoiler alert. I don't even think they're going to go win playoff games. They may not have the chance to win playoff games. They may not make the playoffs, but somewhere in there, you can still have a good season. You can still have an optimistic season, one to turn in next year with more experience, add on some more free agent and draft pieces. But there's still 17 games this year as well, so the Jaguars can easily turn this whole narrative around. Last year, we were talking about how good the Jaguars were coming out of week one because they won, and that was their only win last year. So if anything, last year taught us to not overreact about week one, whether your team won by 30 like the Saints or lost by 20 to the Texans like the Jaguars, or anyone in between. That's the fun thing about week one. A lot of overreaction, and I'm trying my best to stay away from that, both as a football fan and a Jaguars fan. Next week, week 2, they go play the Denver Broncos, who are just coming off a big win against the Giants. Jacksonville's having their home opener, even though the field has seen action already this season with the Saints and Packers yesterday. Denver, their defense is going to be a lot more unforgiving than the Texans' defense, I believe. A lot of those passes yesterday that weren't interceptions that ended up being dropped by the defense or tipped or just out of reach. Denver will probably make you pay for a lot of those. It scares me a little bit for a rookie to play the Broncos. I'm glad it's not in Denver. I'm glad it's in Jacksonville. But we'll see how that goes. And hopefully the Jaguars can turn it around and prove that week one was a fluke. That being said, if your team finished 0-1 like mine did, your team may be talked about in this next segment. This is going to be Hit or Stand 0-1 edition. We're going to talk about teams that went 0-1, that lost Sunday, that had expectations to win or do well and just simply couldn't come out of the weekend with a win. Number 1 matters a lot to you out there. For a lot of you, I know. The New England Patriots playing the Miami Dolphins, who every year give New England trouble. Usually it's at the back end of the season. It was right in the front. Week 1 right away. Rookie quarterback for the Patriots. Mac Jones, that being said, from Alabama. I think he played great. Nothing bad to say about Mac Jones. He didn't have a 300-yard, 3-touchdown, 3-pick game lighting up the stat sheet like Trevor Lawrence, but he played way more efficient. He may have not played in a way where it could propel his team to victory, but he definitely played in a way that kept his team from losing. He gave them every chance, and unfortunately, a few turnovers, and Miami's defense stepped up. The box score kind of shows that as well, that kind of deception. I thought when you look at that stat sheet, you see a 100-yard rusher with Damian Harris. You see a good receiving game from Aguilar. You see Mac Jones have a good game. You see the Dolphins' offense kind of get held down and compressed. So you think the defense played a good game for New England. But unfortunately, 17-16, they lose on the standings. It says 0-1, just like it would for any other team. But that 1-point loss, there is something to be said there. It wasn't anything embarrassing. It wasn't anything I don't think New England can't bounce back from. They play the Jets next week. They do go in after that to play the Saints, Tampa, Texans in the middle, but Cowboys after that. So the Pats don't have a cupcake schedule in these next few weeks by any means. But with the Jets next week, I certainly think they can bounce back. I'll say hit for the Patriots. Pats fans, don't worry just yet. Another team that had high expectations coming into this season got stuck with a hard opponent, the Arizona Cardinals. And, of course, I'm talking about the Tennessee Titans that got beat up pretty bad by the Cardinals. Kyler Murray's just a video game cheat code. I don't think anyone out there is going to argue that. There's a play going around Twitter right now where he is just weaving in and out of the defense and looking like you and I would in Madden, just holding down the turbo button, running around the backfield, finding an open receiver, and just gunning it down there. And when you have someone like a DeAndre Hopkins that can get you 2 touchdowns and nearly 100 yards in a game, that's going to work for Kyler every time. And it did. Even though the Titans are a very stingy, very talented defense, it just didn't matter. The Cardinals were on one, and they caught fire. And their defense also, I mean, they held Derrick Henry. What was he, 50-something yards he ended up with? Under 60 yards. The Titans were playing from behind, sure, but the Titans are not scared to use Derrick Henry, whether they're winning or losing a game. They've shown that plenty of times in the past. But the Cardinals stood firm. They held Derrick Henry down. They didn't give a chance for the Titans to claw back into the game. And good on them. But for the Titans, they have a tough one next week. They go into Seattle, a Seattle team that just beat up on the Colts, so their momentum's pretty high. For the Titans, I know I'm a Jaguars fan. You can call me a Titans hater, but I truly believe this one's a stand. Titans do have to worry. They had a lot of expectations coming into this year. It's fine losing to the Cardinals, but the way they lost to the Cardinals leaves a lot on the table. They have to go out and prove. They may go out and prove it. But for right now, I'm not too bullish on the Titans. Next week's going to say a lot about that team. Another AFC team, another potential AFC contender for a lot of people, the Buffalo Bills. They played the Pittsburgh Steelers. They looked good most of the game. They shut out the Steelers in the first half. They went into the third quarter, looked okay. Then they had a sequence of drives that just turned the whole game around. And this was a 4th and long that they went for. I believe it was 4th and 7 or 4th and 8. Didn't convert. Next drive, they get 4th and 1. Weren't able to convert. And then after that, they try to punt, and they get their punt blocked. The Steelers recover and get a touchdown out of it. So in those 3 plays, they could have sealed the game, but instead they gave the game back to Pittsburgh. And, you know, in a defensive game like that, you just can't have those type of mistakes that you'll lose every time with that. And it was looking like the Steelers were going to lose because of the little mistakes they made, the lack of execution. But the Bills ultimately just had that. I think the block punt was really the big play of the game. I think a lot of people will agree there. Which, for the Bills, leaves some optimism that, hey, it was one play. There was a few things here, there, and the other thing that we could have done better. But hey, we didn't go get blown out by 30. They kept their identity. Josh Allen didn't play terrible by any means. He got contained. He got, his stats got minimized, his impact on the game. But I don't think it's much to worry about. They play the Dolphins next week. Could be a tough game. If they can get out of that game, however, they go play Washington and Houston before they have to warm up for juggernauts, the Chiefs and Titans. I'll say hit on the Bills. I think they're fine. I think they will, put together a good string of wins. Hopefully they can either win one or the other against the Chiefs or Titans, and then they'll be good to go from there, likely winning the AFC East, because I don't think the Patriots will beat them once or twice this season. So we will say hit on the Buffalo Bills. Don't circle the wagons just yet. They may be okay. Dog Pound, you're next. The Cleveland Browns. They were up 22-10 on the Kansas City Chiefs, which a lot of you out there, if you didn't watch the game and you know football, are already saying, well, that doesn't matter. 12 points for the Chiefs, that's nothing. And you would be absolutely right, because the Chiefs, similar to how Kyler Murray's no pun intended, cheat code. Tried to say chief code, but cheat code. So's Patrick Mahomes. So's Tyreek Hill. Second half, they came out, bombed it. Just like the meme says, Tyreek Hill's down there somewhere. Chucked it down there, found him, got the touchdown. From there, the defense stood tall coming down the stretch, and the Chiefs just went and won that game. I put it down as the Chiefs are going to chief, they're just, it's like the Tom Brady effect for a lot of years. You can have them down, but if you don't put your foot on their throat and hold them down, they're going to come back and win. They will find a way to win. Good teams find a way to win, and the Chiefs are just that. But for the Browns, their defense, it's hard to get a gauge on the defense. You're playing the Chiefs. You gave up 30-plus points, but I can't hold that against the defense. It's the Kansas City Chiefs, for God's sakes. But the offense should be optimistic. I think Baker played a good game. I think Nick Chubb played a great game. Jarvis played a great game, and that was all without Odell Beckham. So, also, David Njoku out there. Shout out to the U. He played a good game. So I think the Browns should be optimistic. Next week they play the Texans. According to the spread, a lot of people already think that the Texans win was a fluke against the Jaguars and that the Browns can just go run town on them. I don't know about all that, but I will say hit for the Cleveland Browns. Losing to the Chiefs, yeah, it was a blown lead, but you shouldn't panic about that. You shouldn't be hitting the panic button and thinking about all these big moves to make. I think the Browns, if you thought they'd be okay coming into the year, yesterday shouldn't have changed that. I don't think all that drastically. Finally, the Green Bay Packers. Now, speaking of drastically, my God, that was a drastic change of events from what people thought it would be coming into the game. Jameis Winston, a.k.a. GOAT quarterback of all time, apparently. The man threw for 5 touchdowns. First player in NFL history to throw for 5 touchdowns and not throw for 150 yards or more. Very odd stat, but just, man, if there isn't a stat that just screams Jameis Winston, it's a weird stat like that, in my opinion. Just perfect. Involves winning, involves success, but in such a weird way that just isn't normal at all. That's Jameis Winston for you. And there's nothing wrong with that, especially when you're winning games against the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 133 passing yards. My goodness. Talent-wise, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but it's fair to say that he may have had the worst performance of any starting quarterback in week 1. Just awful. It was so bad that you had a theory going around on social media that Aaron Rodgers just isn't trying, that he's purposely trying to play his way out of Green Bay so they trade him. In my opinion, that's just stupid. That's a stupid theory. It's fun to think about, but they're professional football players. He would never have came back, put himself through a whole I shouldn't say off season because he didn't really do anything in the off season, but just put himself through all that drama in the offseason just to come back, put his body at risk for week 1, and not try. I just think that's nonsense. The Packers next week, though, they have the Detroit Lions, which I think they should beat the Lions, but the Lions showed that they're not going to be pushed around. They kept it close to the 49ers. A little late comeback from them. They scored over 30 points. And then they go Sunday night. The Packers go Sunday night into San Francisco on week 3. So they don't have a lot of room there to be optimistic. They have to go out there, hit the ground running, and just forget about week 1 because if they somehow lose to the Lions, just wrap up the season because 0-2 with those type of vibes from the first 2 games of the season, I don't think they can come back from. And I don't care how good Aaron Rodgers is. For now, I'm going to say stand because they just haven't shown me any reason to believe in them. I will go against the stand a little bit and say that I do think the Packers kind of show people like, well, they're not that bad. They're not, what was the score? 38-3, whatever it was. They're not that bad. They may not be what they were a few years ago, but I do think they bounce back against the Lions. But for now, they're a stand. They're just a stand until they show something better. So we have Thursday night football this week. We have the New York Giants going to Washington. We have the superstar duel of quarterbacks, duel of a lifetime, primetime television. You have Danny Dimes, Daniel Jones going against Taylor Heineke. Ryan Fitzpatrick got hurt, had a hip injury, left the game against the Chargers on Sunday. He's out for, I believe, it's at least 6 weeks. He got put on the IR. That's a tough one to come back from either way for Ryan Fitzpatrick. But in the meantime, Taylor Heineke, I'm obviously being sarcastic when I say, this duel of great quarterbacks. But he did have a good game against the Chargers, 11 for 15, threw for a $122 and a touchdown. In a Thursday night football game, Giants in Washington, that can win a week. Hate to say it, those Thursday night games with the NFC East are the type where it's 16-14 or 22-19. It's just little games like that where Antonio Gibson can be the difference. A quick Logan Thomas touchdown late from Heineke. Little things like that could prove to be the difference. For the New York Giants, against Denver, they just did not look good. I was watching that game, rooting for the Giants for my good friend Nathan out there, a big Giants fan, but they just seem like where they'd get to third down, their defense would show up for first down, second down, and then just would break down on third, and they'd give up a 13-yard pass on 3rd and 11. They gave up a 10-yard pass on 3rd and 9. It just seemed like they couldn't keep them from that line, and Denver made them pay, and that was Teddy Bridgewater, which, probably better than Taylor Heineke, sure. I think that's safe to say, but just Saquon Barkley, I get he's coming back from ACL injury. You don't want to throw him out to the Wolves, get him hurt right away. We're in it for the long game with Saquon. He is a talent that the Giants want for years to come. You don't want him going into a game just getting banged up, but Sunday wasn't enough, in my opinion. You need more on Thursday if you're going to have a chance to win that game. You need more carries. Sure, protect him at all costs, but at the end of the day, if you're going to play him, you need to use him to win. And if you don't think he's good enough to play a full workload, maybe just rest him for the next week, because just what they were doing last week just wasn't working. And if it's not going to work against Denver, it's not going to work against divisional teams who play you twice a year, who have your number for the most part, because the Giants really didn't have all that much turnover. They had Daniel Jones. They still have the same receiving core. They still, have most running backs in the backfield that aren't Saquon fully healthy yet, just like last year. So even though the names may not be big for Thursday night football, it could be a fun Thursday night football game for the sheer fact of it being a divisional rivalry and a ton of unpredictability coming into it. Right now, the line is Washington -3, their favorites. I'm going to take the Giants here. I'll take the points. I do think the Giants can go and win the game. I'm not, by any stretch of the imagination, saying that I think they definitely will win the game, or I guarantee they'll win the game. I think they could win the game, but I feel much safer saying that they will keep it close. And if they lose, it will be with under 3 points or at 3 points with a field goal. But should be an exciting Thursday night football game. For week 3, I'm going to try to be better about putting out my picks on a, something besides just a basic social media post. We'll work on that, but look for those on Sunday morning when you wake up. My goal is to have those posted as close to kickoff as possible while still having a chance for people to see the picks. Just because so much changes before kickoff, right? You have all these injuries, you have last second scratches, which changes the spread drastically. And when a spread goes from 2.5 to 4.5, that, being on each side of the field goal spread is a huge difference for picks. So we want it accurate. But obviously on social media in the meantime, always reach out at Pushing the Pylon on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Reach out with any this or that questions with, hey, do you think the Patriots can win next week against the Jets? Do you think they'll win by more than 5? Or fantasy this week, I have receiver X, Y, and Z. Which 2 should I play? questions like that, send them my way. I've been playing fantasy football a long time, where at least my perspective will be rooted in some type of logic or some stats at least. But that's what we're here for. I love doing this podcast, but we're also here for you as well to get more excited about football on your end, whether that's for fantasy football or to watch your favorite team get covered. For interviews, we're also working on some interviews. Be looking out for some of those. Hopefully by episode 5 or 6, we start working in a 10 to 15 minute time slot with a guest, maybe more depending on who the guest is. Talk to them about football, whether their walk of life involves football, talk about their perspective, or if they're just a fan like you and I, talk about their favorite team, bring them on for a week where their team's playing a primetime game coming up, or they just had a primetime game the week before. Just little things like that to keep this podcast going and alive. We have a short episode today. I'm going to end it here, but be on the lookout later this week for more content relating to week 2, for more of the games, for more of the previews, ultimately for more of my picks. Thank you all very much for watching. This was Pushing the Pylon. I'm Jim Tannhauser. See you next time.